Welcome, everybody. I'm very pleased to introduce you to and have GG Renee Hill here for our conversation today on the podcast. I'm going to read a quick bio introduction for her so that you can get excited along with me. So, GG Renee Hill is the author of Self Care Check In, a guided journal to build healthy habits and devote time to you, and A Year of Self Reflection journal, 365 days of guided prompts to slow down, tune in, and grow. Her debut book of essays, Storywork, Field Notes on Self-Discovery and Reclaiming Your Narrative, is forthcoming from Broadleaf Books in the fall of 2025. Her books center writing as a tool for healing, self-discovery, and creative courage. Gigi is also a creative coach and facilitator whose workshops and coaching programs break down barriers to expression through a holistic approach to creativity that emphasizes self-care and mindfulness. She is the founder of the Inner Story Writing Circle, a membership for creatives that provides mentorship and community support for the emotional, strategic, and developmental challenges of pursuing creative callings while prioritizing self-care. In addition to working with individuals through one-to-one and group coaching, she facilitates transformative workshops for a diverse list of corporate and nonprofit clients and literary organizations. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Marketing from Morgan State University, and she lives in Maryland with her family. Welcome.
Thank you, Ellen. I'm so excited to be here today.
I'm very excited. And I want to share with our audience that I found you. I did one of your creative courage writing workshops. I don't remember what year it was now. I know it was pandemic times. I remember trying to write at a coffee shop and everybody was masked and separated, and I was all by myself in this corner. So it might have been 2021. But I'm very excited to talk about the work you do, the writing you do, and particularly self-care and mindfulness and all these pieces that creatives desperately need and have a hard time prioritizing. But
Mhm.
before I just dive in, can you talk a little bit yourself about how this started for you? How did you get to be who you are now?
I was starting my life as a young adult, like after college, working. I was in financial services. I had, like you said, I have a degree in marketing, so I'd always been molded to go into business or engineering. Like my mother had all these ideas of what she wanted me to do, and she very much molded me to pursue certain career lanes. And so that's what I was doing. I was checking off the boxes, like many of us do when we're, at the beginning of our adult lives. I became a mom pretty early. At 24, I had my first child. So I was working, being a mom. Everything on paper seemed fine. I was taking care of myself. I was getting promoted, but inside I felt very disconnected and overwhelmed and it didn't feel sustainable, but all of the conditioning that I had and all the examples I had were that this is what life is. You're busy. If you're busy all the time, you're successful in your job, you're able to take care of yourself, then you're doing the right thing. Like this will all settle down later as your kids get older, things like that.
Hmm.
But as time went on, I had more kids, like I said, getting promoted. I was just feeling more and more overwhelmed, and my mental health was really, this was early thousands. I didn't have the language yet. I didn't have the um, societal, cultural context to understand what was happening with me. I just thought there was something wrong with me. Like everyone else seems to be able to handle this just fine. But I was really struggling. And eventually I confided in a coworker about how I was feeling. And we would talk about our childhoods and kind of like our upbringing. And I shared with her that I had grown up with a mother who had, at the time of my childhood, she was undiagnosed, and she was diagnosed with schizophrenia when I was in college, and that I had been through a lot and never really talked to anyone about it, never really reckoned with it. Right. And she was going to therapy at the time, and she said, I think you would love my therapist. Have you ever thought about going to therapy? And I was like, no, like I'm fine. I don't need to go to therapy. It's not like, it was like this still taboo thing in my mind. If you go into therapy, then you must be, you know, not able to function, not able to, right? All
Yeah.
of those narratives. And so that's what really I went, and
Yeah.
that's what really got me started with writing because the therapist was, first of all, she saw me and she
Yeah.
heard me. I had never had a space like that to be able to say, I've never healed from this. And honestly, I didn't think I had the right to say that there was even something I needed to heal from, right? Because I had always had a shelter over my head. I always had food to eat. I had a family who loved me. It would be ungrateful for me to say I had a difficult childhood or that there was anything to even overcome. So if you don't acknowledge that these things happened that shaped you, you don't even realize it yourself, you don't ask for help because you don't even realize. So she saw me, she heard me, and she heard me saying that writing and reading had always been something that comforted me, that allowed me to escape the struggles that I had as a kid. And she encouraged me to circle back to that, so she would give me questions to answer, reflection prompts, and that just opened the floodgates. And I was like, oh, wow. Like it was so cathartic. And it just really started me on the journey to, at least at first, just writing for myself.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. Bits and pieces of that I knew from the privilege of having been in some of your workshop offerings, but I don't think I understood all that depth. This also
Mhm.
feels very synchronous, if you don't mind a brief share. Um,
Yeah.
so I have had, I don't know what little bubble I've been in for a couple weeks, but well, there's, I have a lot I want to say out loud, but it's not going to come in one little flow.
Take your time.
You're I kept thinking, I was like, oh, this is coming up and it's really good timing because I'm gonna have this great conversation with Gigi and I know why this is showing up for me. So two
Mm,
nights ago, I ended up in my garage. I have a bin. It's a
okay.
bin of the past 30 something years. So I'm 44 or I'm
Mhm,
almost 44. And
mhm,
the bin has basically there's little kid stuff that my parents had given me that I just is in there, but then there's a lot of my writing and everything, journaling
mm,
from 13, 14, 15. It's in there. I was like, I have so many books.
mm.
And as I was going through it, I found a piece of paper. This was actually just a jotted note and it was tucked into something. It was from May of 2000. So I was in college. And I wrote in there, so something you said right here just hit it on the nose for me, like this era and this time, because I too was struggling. I was struggling deeply, and I found a lot of the writing. I was like, wow, because I remember how people saw me, which was confident, self-assured, a go-getter, always like, with somebody doing something. And reading my writing, I told my husband last night, I was like, I was a disaster. I was so unsure of myself. I was so insecure. I was so scared. I was so punitive. I was really critical of
Mm,
my body and my capacity and all of this stuff. And I found this line I wrote. I'm really embarrassed. Eric, and I'm like, who's Eric? I don't know. I remember it was this kid at the dorm, I think, and it was
mhm.
like Eric saw me where my bike was parked at 23rd and San Gabriel. This was in Austin, Texas. And he asked me what I was doing over there because it was really far west campus. It was very far from where I lived. It was like near the fraternity houses and all that, sororities,
Okay.
but it was like a commercial building in that
Mhm.
area. And I looked at him and I said I didn't know how to answer him. I felt like a deer caught in headlights because I had been to my counselor's office because I was in therapy for the first time because I had told my family that I was really struggling. This is my first year of college, but I was wrestling with a lot of depression and a lot of anxiety, and I didn't know how to get out of it.
Mhm.
And so that was, I don't remember anything about that therapist. As you were talking, I was like, oh, I wish they had told me to go write some writing prompts that might have helped. You actually reminded me of the PTSD coach I worked with last year, who that was a really good trauma opening and liberating for me.
Yeah.
I have an epi for listeners who are interested. That's an episode with Dr. Meredith Shepherd. But the writing as a tool, right, is
Mm.
so powerful. But I'm
No, no. Yeah. I was just thinking as you were talking, I
yeah.
wonder, if I'm sure she's still practicing. I wonder, it would be kind of cool to circle back to her and just tell her thank you for opening that door for me because she really did. I had never like I mentioned to her that writing and reading had always been a solace for me, but I didn't write. I think I was afraid to write about what was actually happening because nobody was talking about it. There
Yeah.
was no, oh, let's have a family discussion about what's going on with your mom. So as kids, we emulate what everyone else is just kind of like, oh, there's a big elephant in the room, but we're not going to talk about it. So that showed up in my creative expression. I didn't talk directly about what I was dealing with. I would write about like diary form, like a little girl, like I went to school today and the cute boy looked at me and this is the outfit I wore. I did that kind of diary stuff. And then I also did like storytelling, like writing about this imaginary family, for example, that it was
Oh,
a family. And this is the things they did. And it's so interesting. At the time, I didn't realize I was doing that. But in hindsight, because you make me think of it when you're talking about your diaries, I remember writing about, I had certain little families that I would tell their stories. And it was sort of me acting out what I wish I had.
yeah.
At the time, The Cosby Show was big and a lot of these like sitcoms. And I wanted a sitcom family. Like I
Yes.
wanted that normalcy. I craved that. So
Yeah.
that's what I would write about. So when I went to therapy and she's like, you can write about your life. You can write about your feelings. I had been doing that a little bit through college, venting sometimes, right? But it wasn't a regular practice, and it often didn't really make me feel better necessarily. It might have been, if this makes sense at all, and for listeners who maybe I've come across so many clients and people I've worked with this who say, I do like to write things down to get it out of my mind, but I don't necessarily feel better after I do it. I kind of
Right.
write myself into a hole. And I'm like, I get that, right? And I think that's what I used to do. And then through, I think it was just meant to be, Ellen. I think this is just my calling because when the therapist gave me that window to say, you can write and heal through writing, I was like, really? And it was just a rabbit hole. I started writing, and at the same time, I started grabbing books and resources and like investigating. At the time, again, it was still the internet wasn't what it is now. Like, what was this? I was probably,
Even
I think,
5 years ago, it wasn't what it is now.
you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I think it was like late 2000s. So it was like, yeah, the internet was there, but it was still, I was still probably more likely to go to a book than to the internet for a lot of things. That took me a
Yeah.
while. So I would go to books and I was reading, and I was just like, this is a whole, like, I can write about my life. I could like personal essays, memoir. It just, and I was like, I just felt this almost electricity, like this knowing that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. But it was very raw, and it was very much still a little seed planted in me that I would over the years need to water, and that would go through storms of, just resistance, right? Talking to
Yeah.
someone about it, and you talk to someone, you confide in someone, oh, I'm excited about this, and they're like, you can't do that. Nobody's going to want to read your stuff. You're not famous, or you can't talk about that. You're going to lose credibility. If you talk about mental illness, you're going to lose credibility in your job. People aren't going to want to, all the things you hear that are like, you can't do this, all the limiting beliefs,
Everyone
right?
else's fears. Everyone
Everyone
putting
else's
their
fears.
fears on
Mm-hmm.
you. There's
Mm-hmm.
there's one thing that you're talking about the seed and then the
Yeah.
people kind of piling on it. And it made
Yeah.
me think of one of the kind of like key phrases that you have throughout your work about reclaiming your story. And it feels
Yeah.
almost like that initial push was just permission to even claim your story. Not even a reclaim yet, just to claim it.
Yes, yes, to tell
Yes.
the story to yourself the way you experienced it and not question it and not say, well, I don't have a right to. Or so for me, so much of my story I never claimed in the first place, like you said, because I had a lot of issues with reality. Because again, growing up with a mother who had schizophrenia, her reality wasn't always mine.
They don't match.
They don't
I
match.
appreciate and understand that very much.
I know you do. Because so when she said you can write what you experienced, I'm like, oh, I had never really given myself permission. And I was to even just say I was confused about what's reality and what's not. So when my mother would say, you did this or you did this on purpose or this happened, there was a part of me that was like, no. But then there was another child part of me, this is my mom, that's like, well, maybe, like, I don't
Yeah,
know, because
I'm
you
supposed to
listen
listen
to
to
your
my
parents.
mom.
Yes,
She's my leader, she's my guide. Of
yes,
course, she has my best interest in mind until illness takes
yes,
over, and it's not, but she still thinks it is.
yes. It's
Yes.
so confusing.
I
And you
have,
grow up your whole childhood and adolescence, and even young adulthood, that's affecting you.
yes. I
Mhm.
have, I want to circle back because I interrupted you a little bit on the initial where people were kind of throwing some of their fears and limiting beliefs at you to kind of keep you in this other
Yeah.
place. How did you, what, do you remember a specific turning point of what pushed you through that? Or was it a steady progress? How did that unfold?
It was a certain persistence that is really kind of hard to explain because it doesn't really fit my personality. There's people that are kind of like really driven and can put their blinders on and just kind of go after something. And I mostly am not that person. I'm like, give me the pathway, oh, go to college. Okay, I can do that. Get a job in, a well-known company or a reputable company. I can do that. Like all of these mainstream things that seemed socially acceptable, I was very comfortable doing. But anything out of bounds, anything, out of my comfort zone wasn't really my jam. But for some reason with this, even with people projecting these doubts, it was like a fire. I was just kind of like, I'm gonna do this anyway. I can't. It's like I could not do it. Right? It was like I couldn't not do it. Now, did it affect me? Sure, sure. It caused a lot of progress, then regression, progress, then regression, self doubt, self confidence. It did cause a lot of that. But then also, I would say, Ellen, to your question, while there was also a lot of that resistance, there was also just enough positive reinforcement. People saying, "Oh my God, this isn't like this is this is what you need to be doing." So I had close friends, like my
Mm.
inner circle, my close friends were like, "This is you." In fact, it was one of my best friends who got me to start a blog because she's like my best friend since I was 9 years old. I was on Facebook. I had just gotten on Facebook like maybe 2009, 2008. I had just gotten on Facebook and I'm not really one for small talk. I mean, small talk is cool a little bit, but I'm just like usually in the deep end somewhere. So I was on Facebook like, oh, talking about soulful things and just writing paragraphs. And my friend was like, maybe you should write a blog. Like, it seems like you have a lot to say. Like, this is like, maybe you should take this, like, really do something with this. I was like, really? And at the time in the Black community, there was a big explosion of blogs, people blogging about, it was like this mass exodus from getting relaxers in our hair, this chemical process that straightened our hair. And we were learning that not only is it bad for us from a health perspective, there's also this empowerment of just embracing your natural hair texture as Black women. So it was this big explosion of blogs. So I was exploring all of that. And I was like, oh, this is like a really cool creative outlet. I was still working in corporate America and I needed a creative outlet. I needed something for me. My kids were like, I think my oldest was maybe like 9 or 10, my son. So they ranged all the way down to, my youngest was probably a baby at the time. And she was born in 2010. So yeah. So anyway, it's like this will just be a creative outlet. I'm going to blog about hair because I was doing the hair thing, but I'm going to blog about how this transformation of letting my natural hair texture grow out is a metaphor for this internal transformation where I'm finding my authentic self again, finding my voice, finding this truer version of myself that I've been kind of hiding behind a mask. And so that, like you said, I love what you said about so many of us don't even give ourselves that first permission to even claim our story. So this was like that claiming. And I had, so through Facebook, then through the blog, there was just voices that would come through and say, wow, like reading this really, I just needed this right now. Um, you're helping me. Just those little messages, just every now and then, I was like, okay, like I'm helping someone. Like even if there's a little ripple effect, that feels really good. It feels like I'm using my pain or something that has always caused me shame, and I'm transforming it into something that I can be of service with. So I'm helping myself and I'm helping others. And I just kept unraveling that, like going further with that. Like, I know there's something to this more than just the fears and the doubts, because they were there. But I was
Yeah.
like, there's something else here pulling me that just feels like what I'm supposed to be doing. And I just kept going with it.
That makes me, I'm glad I didn't have to say anything for a little bit because I was fighting back tears. That I got really emotional. Um, when you're letting your hair grow out and you're reclaiming who you really are inside, it's this theme that I see repeated across so many of us who are doing healing work, which is that the first thing we have to do is come home to ourselves
Yes.
and
Yeah.
accept ourselves as who we are. And the other part that comes with that, and the word sovereignty and liberation, that
I
you're not
love that.
hiding behind that mask and you're in your full self. And of course in 2010 it might have been like a version of the full self that you haven't been yet but is on the way to who you are today in 2025, and who knows where you'll be in 2040, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
it's this
Like
amazing
layers.
continuum, so
Hmm.
many,
Hmm.
oh, so many layers. Yes. um the other thing I had, so one of the questions I have around this unraveling and claiming your own story and reclaiming it, and is a place where I have like this is a selfish question. I have gotten
Hmm.
very stuck in this place, which is when there are two narratives, and you did grow up in a home where you know
Hmm.
that you were loved and that you did have food on the table and the lights were on, and your parents still had the notion to give you the right things. What right do you have to take that away from them by telling a story? Because when you said all of that, I was just like, oh, right. Because I had a car when I was 17. I got to do all the things, and it was nice. Like you
Hmm.
on the outside again, the structure looked very stable.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so who am I to tear my parents down in front of the world in order to be able to tell my story? So that courageousness.
Hmm.
And I still wrestle with that. Like I talk about it and more now than I ever did before, but I still wrestle with that line. And am I writing about it out of bitterness and anger right
Yeah.
now?
Yeah.
Or am
Hmm.
I actually processing something right now? Or am I really shaming them because I feel vindictive? Like,
Yeah.
what does that look like? And do you have advice for me or for other people who are trying to find a way to reclaim or tell their story while also honoring that there's love, but
Hmm.
there's a lot of pain? Like, what does
Yeah.
that look like?
I'm just taking notes because I want to make sure I hit all. That's such a good question, and I want to make sure I hit all the things. So that it's such a process, Ellen. This all started for me, the writing and the blogging started in like 2009-ish, right? What is it, 2025 now?
Yeah.
It's been a constant like layer after layer, the shedding. And I didn't start off writing publicly about my family dynamics yet. It was just kind of like sort of more vague, like, talking about pain and emotional healing and self-discovery and identity and things like that, self-love, right? Like a concept that I just, what? No, like I'm so flawed. I'm so broken. Like I did not love myself and I
Yeah.
didn't realize that. So all of those things was very much centered in me. But as you're doing that work, you hopefully find your way back to the roots of it all, the roots and origins of it all. And you start to do that inner child work. And over time, I think it wasn't until 2016, so 2009, so like 6, 7 years later, I was like, you know what? I need to go back. I need to go back and I need to explore some of these childhood stories that I never told myself, that I never acknowledged. So it took me years to even get to the point where I was really willing to do that in writing. to go back and tell myself those stories. And I decided it would just be a personal project. And for me, it was like a memoir journal. So separate from my journal of day to day, it was like, this is going to be specifically for thinking of stories, things that happened that I never really, that I kind of blocked out. And it was hard because I think when you have these difficulties in childhood, sometimes you do block things out. You dissociate, right? And it's hard to bring back those memories. You're afraid to bring them back because you're like, oh, what if I fall into a hole and can't get out? It's scary to revisit these things. And I wasn't in therapy at the time. This was just all part of my own practice in my own, like I said, I was reading. I was kind of my own coach at the time.
I feels like you're
And
creating your own healing tonic as you go. Yeah.
yeah, my own healing protocol. And I was like, I need to go back and I need to tell these stories. It's going to be a creative project and it's going to be a healing project. And I'm just going to tell myself these stories. And I just allowed myself to remember what I could remember and let go of what I couldn't. So I started that and it started with like a story bank. I was like, okay, I'm gonna tell about that first day when my mother accused me of trying to seduce my father, right? I'm gonna tell that story of that time when we went to the beach and she accused like all these things that were really painful that I had never really allowed myself to sit and write out the story. So first that was just for me, but those were the beginnings of my current book story work, and I tell a lot of those stories in the book. And between then and now, so that was 2016 when that project started, and I think it wasn't until the early 2020s when I got to that point, like you said, where I was like, I know now that I can tell these stories with grace and honoring my family and my parents. And what I had to get to was I had to tell the stories and honor myself first. But then as I was writing it, I realized what what shaped the circumstances that created this environment. I wanted to really look at my mom and my dad, the environment that they grew up in. They were both part of this. It was actually their generation was called the silent generation. And it was a time when you did not air your dirty laundry. You never wanted to be seen as less than or broken or flawed in any way. Mental illness was something you had to hide, particularly in the Black community. We already had so much stacked up against us. So if there was mental illness in the family, you don't talk about that because that could just bring more persecution your way, more disadvantage. So I just wanted to do research to really understand what the generational right story that was being told that I was just a part of. And what did my parents grow up under? What led to my parents and particularly my dad, I adored my dad. My dad passed in 2017.
Mm,
I adored him, but I also had this unexpressed anger because
yeah.
I didn't feel like he really protected me from my mom or like helped me navigate. I feel like I felt a little abandoned. I had to acknowledge all of that. And like you said, because I adored him, how do I express that without dishonoring him? How do I express that while I had all of this? I'm estranged from my mom. I don't interact with her at all. How do I express that without also acknowledging if it weren't for my mom, I probably wouldn't have the love for academics and art and spirituality, all the things she implanted in me, even as she was declining and becoming sicker and sicker and hurting my mental health through no fault of her own, through her illness. But she was also, in many ways, an amazing mother. It's very confusing, but to tell that whole story, I had to do some healing to get there first. I had to honor my experience, sort of that the different versions of my inner child who, the innocent little girl who was just heartbroken of the things her mother would say to her, the angry teenager. I had to acknowledge all those parts before I could start to give grace back to my parents and say, okay, while all of this was going on, I also had an environment where I felt safe to flourish and grow. I was in dance classes, I took piano, I was in chorus. I was like they gave me so much opportunity. It wasn't like I was just this, abandoned, which is how I often felt, emotionally abandoned child. I was also really poured into and loved. For me to tell this story, I got to tell the whole thing. And so, again, reading memoirs, listening to artists and people that I admire. I guess a lot of them had to have been authors. Listen to them talk about this craft of personal storytelling where we want to tell multi-dimensional stories. Like no, like I'm always obsessed with storytelling, whether it's movies or whatever. And I love stories about complicated families, complicated characters who are not all good or bad. No villains, no victims here, right? It's like that bad guy, how did he become a bad guy, right? Or this child who is acting like how did that what shaped them? I became really curious about that and decided like for me to tell this story, I need to be able to give like all the sides of these people so that it's not like I'm just sort of demonizing, oh, because of my mother, I now, my mental health is messed up too. And I no, that's not the whole story at all. So I had to tell the story from my perspective, but with the grace of, I see, if my mother had gotten the help she needed at a young age, if she hadn't been grown up in this environment where she had to hide her struggles, then things might have been different. So my calling then is, how do I make sure that I break this cycle?
Yeah.
And that became actually a motivation for me to break through my fear of judgment and being perceived and criticized. I was so terrified of being criticized for being estranged from my mom, like that shame and that all of those things I was dealing with that and uncertain about exposing that and people saying you're a terrible person for that. I was so afraid of that. But I was like, I need to be able to tell the story from my perspective and just sort of offer up my humanity in that way, right? This is my story, and I'm doing everything I can to break this pattern of silence and of shame so that I can set a better example for my kids and for anybody who reads my story and can relate in any way.
Um, Sitting here fighting back tears again. Yeah, you probably, if you're watching this on the video channel, maybe you see my face getting pink. I have no idea. Or, but I just hope for everyone listening, if this is hitting you, if this is resonating with you, I mean, this is so much truth and wisdom and grace. I think grace is like an underlining, defining emotion. I feel makes me incredibly emotional because I feel so seen
Yeah.
in that telling, and it feels, I don't know how you do it, but this is definitely your calling
Mm-hmm.
because it feels like you just laid out a roadmap of honoring the multidimensionality and the complexity of it.
Mm-hmm.
Love that you went back to look at this generational divide of what comes between and what you ended up growing up in just by kind of the effect of being born at the time you were born
Yes.
and having a way because it's really you're honoring also the character of time and place and geography and social movement
Yes.
because it's not it feels so personal and it feels so isolating to grow up in a construct that is has a lot of cognitive dissonance because you have
Mm-hmm.
a lot of provision for what you need, you know you're loved. I also took piano, I did martial arts, I did sports. My parents were like, you need to take advantage of all these extracurricular activities so we can pour that into you, right? And that
Yes.
is how they demonstrated love.
Yep.
And then also at the same time feeling ignored and abandoned and criticized and punished and for just being me in ways that made me turn into a shell and have a face on the outside that's very
Mm-hmm.
acceptable and exactly what my parents wanted. And then a crumbling interior of mushy goo. Right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. Oh, and so I just really appreciate so much the laying out of how you did it and how it does take time. And it makes me think about how important it is, especially now, right? Now in time where we have the camera just went out a little bit. We have ChatGPT. We
Mm-hmm.
can bypass a critical thinking process and skip writing.
Mm-hmm.
And everything is clickbait and 30
Yeah.
seconds of attention for how many people or many or most people are interacting with forms of media.
Mm-hmm.
How important it is now to acknowledge and accept and even celebrate that doing some of this, you have permission to take time and you can have a slow unfolding so that you're not looking for instant results. Like how many people are offering instantaneous results for weight loss or fitness or like all these things,
All the things.
all the things. And if you go underneath all the things, like there's a lot of energy under the stories we've been telling about our lives that you can't get to in 10 minutes, even a week, or even 12 weeks. Like this might be, I
Um,
didn't, I like love that you said you started writing about this in 2016, and some of those essays are showing up 9 years later in this book that you're publishing.
yes,
I mean, I
yes,
pre-ordered
that's
it. We're
true.
going to have all the links so that you can buy all the books. I'm gonna, there's so many
Hmm.
beautiful things you've put out into the world. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean, 9 years later. And the other part of that, Ellen, is the first from 2016 to, I think, because I was writing the journals during the pandemic. So I kind of took a break from the essay writing and the more long form writing while I was working on the journal. So that was like 2019 to like maybe 2022, right?
okay.
Was I was redirected my attention a little bit, maybe working on it a little bit in the background, but it wasn't the main focus. When I came back to it, I had a fresh perspective because up until that point, I was telling myself the stories, like I told you, but it was more like the venting I mentioned. It was more like, oh, it's cathartic. Let me just get these stories out. Let me just tell myself these stories the best I can. And I would share a little bit with, trusted people. And there was something missing. I didn't know what it was yet. I was just kind of like, where is this going though? Like, what is the point of this? There wasn't an arc yet. There wasn't what I know now that I was missing was a healing narrative. And what I mean by that was it was kind of more like I've been through a lot. Look at all the stuff I've been through. Like it was kind of trauma dumping. And I realized that this is not ready because I'm thinking, oh, let me query, let me, get this story out there. And I wasn't really getting a lot of receptivity to that. And I realized there's no arc here. It's just kind of like,
Yeah.
look at me. And so
It's
as I
that
was
inner
working,
child who is saying,
yeah, I
can
never
you
felt
please see
seen.
that something's wrong here? And as a
Yes.
child, we're not going to have an arc or a narrative. We're just going to be screaming.
Yes.
What's
Look
going
at
on?
me.
Look over here.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yes.
Thank you for highlighting this. This is so helpful.
Yes. And
Yes.
and and I that part of the journey is so valid and so necessary. I'm not saying skip that at all. But for me, I knew that, oh, this is just like the surface. Like, so where's like, what is my intention with all of this? And it was just this unfolding, like you said, Ellen. It was like I would go to classes, I would read. It's like, how are you pouring into yourself to develop this story, to develop this is, I guess that was the beginning of the reclaiming,
Yeah.
right? So first I was claiming my story, then the reclaim, then I'm looking at it, I'm observing it, I'm honoring it, I'm all of the things that didn't happen before. Then it's like I had this, and this is one of the things I talk about in story work, is I had this sort of defeated narrative based on that. Like, because of all these things, now I'm broken. Now I'm damaged goods. Now this is why I have all the issues I have. Here's why. Right? Like that was the end of the story. But I was like, that's not the end of the story. How can I take all of this? All of this is my creative material, my life. I get to shape it. I get to decide how I want to use all of this creative material to make a life, to make open up possibilities instead of saying, oh, this is the end. That's where that healing narrative comes in and say, yes, but what's next? What am I going to do with all that? Right. And I was like, so I wrote the journals. And I think that part of writing the journals was because they were so focused on self care and pouring into yourself. And yes, that's
So you can't see it on the podcast, but I'm holding up Gigi's books.
my two journals.
I will, the two journals, yes, self-care check-in and a year of self-reflection. We're going to post them in the links so you can get them. They're gorgeous. Okay, keep going.
They're
Sorry.
such a great way to just get to know yourself better, to
Yes.
do this development work that ultimately, if you do have aspirations to write your own stories in your own way, whether it's fiction, memoir, whatever your aspirations are as a writer, or even it's just for healing, using prompts and self-discovery and that exploration leads you to insights. And
Yeah.
I think that doing that work really helped me come back to story, what turned out to be story work, my new book, with a fresh perspective. And I was like, what is the healing narrative here? What am I actually doing in this book, in my life, in my coaching? What am I helping people do? And it's reclaim their stories, find that healing narrative. Yes, I've been through this. Yes, these are things I struggle with, but how am I using that to empower myself instead of disempower myself? And I was like, this is where I add value. This is where I can let go of all of the shackles that I feel like I've been carrying, even through doing this work. I looked at even just like my parenting up to that point and how I was perpetuating a lot of the bad habits that I was raised with. Um, Hiding things from the kids, like silencing questions that I just wasn't prepared to answer, about like some of the things that were going on in our own household, my own anxiety and depression, fighting those things, not getting help when I needed it, things like that. Was like, I'm perpetuating the same stuff. So when it comes to that reclaiming, it was like, okay, that helped me to continue the book because I was like, every chapter, every story I tell is going to involve this. First, I'm telling the story, and then I'm going to show the reader how I reclaim that story and
Mm.
how I'm using it to find wisdom in what happened to me so that I can apply it to things that I'm dealing with now. So each chapter and then the book as a whole is an example for using stories from my life to show how I found a pathway out of that limited thinking and out of the conditioning that I had. So much of it is subconscious that we don't even realize we're
Yeah.
acting out patterns that we grew up with and we don't even realize it. So we tell ourselves the story. And then when you see it, you're like, oh, I see the pattern. I see it now. And then when you see it, you can do something about it. You can change and open up and consider, okay, instead of this storyline of one phrase I used to say a lot, Ellen, was it was from one of my first self-published books. It's actually right there. She created a story about a broken girl with a broken mother who would grow up to live a broken life. And that was kind of how one of my poetic, like in my sad girl era, that was like my claim to fame. Like, yes, yes, my mother was broken. Now I'm broken. And it's just, I just had this, it was my sad girl era. It was like indulged my sadness. Like it was part of my identity, right? Like I'm this
I know what
broken,
you,
right?
yeah. The indulgence of the sadness and the
Yeah,
grief.
the martyr,
The
right?
martyr. Oh,
Oh,
woe is me.
yes. And
And
I was like, that's a
yeah.
storyline that
Yes.
I'm telling. How do I change that storyline to something empowering and something that like I can actually show my kids that no matter what happens to them in life, they can use it to elevate and not to like bury themselves under. So that's where that reclaiming comes in.
I love this. And this also speaks to me of something that you talk about with writing as a tool for
Mm-hmm.
resilience and growth. Because in what you've just described here, oh, sorry, I have an alarm going off. In what you've just described, that self-healing process and the ability to pull out of the tunnel vision of your own life and see it externally as, oh, here's the pattern I'm recreating without knowing it. And then as opposed to punishing yourself for it, you have the empowerment to adjust and change it, which to me sounds like this resilience to be able to handle the stories. A
Mm-hmm.
resilience to handle the stories. And then with that pattern changing and breaking the cycle, you're growing into going all the way back to what you said earlier, the authentic version of yourself that you get to
Yeah.
be through this writing is recovery, writing
Mm-hmm.
is healing, writing is
Mm-hmm.
growth. Oh,
Yes, yes. You get to integrate all those versions of yourself, your inner child, your shadow self, right? Like all of those versions that we put a lot of energy into compartmentalizing, hiding, pushing it down, when you give it space to be heard, that, those versions that just needed to be heard and to be seen, and you integrate them into your whole, like you become whole again. So that stories that it's amazing to me. There's things that I talk about so comfortably and freely now that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I would have told lies to cover up. I
Yeah.
would have just like shapeshifted, people please, whatever I needed to do to keep that image, to hide those things. And when you do that, you life can never feel really truly fulfilling and aligned. You always feel like something's off because you're hiding, and you don't feel whole, and you feel like shame is taking up so much energy. So this work is for integrating all of those parts and realizing that it's not going to pull you down into this hole you can't climb out of, right? With support, with with an open mind, with curiosity, you can actually navigate out of the holes that you've been stuck in before, and any new holes that might appear in your life, because there's always going to be more. That's where that resilience comes in that you're talking about. You realize that, okay, part of life is grieving, part of life is adversity. And by healing the wounds from my childhood, I'm also teaching myself how to take life as it comes, and the challenges that are down ahead of me. I'm going to be more equipped to navigate those things, and you begin to trust yourself that I can handle it. um, I still will probably always be someone who deals with anxiety and deals with, I'm a highly sensitive person. I feel everything. I worry about everything. That's just my temperament. That's just how I'm wired, right? I'm very neurodivergent. So there's some challenges that I face. But doing the work of healing from, and you're always healing, is never done, but healing from the past and reconciling these stories helps me to, like, story work is this ongoing thing that I catch myself daily telling myself stories, Ellen. Like, oh, my friends are mad at me because this happened. Like, we tell ourselves stories all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Just make assumptions and we spin stories. But when you teach yourself to be curious and to sort of zoom out and ask yourself, well, what am I assuming here? What else could be true? What resources do I have? Do I need a nap? Do I need to do I need to take a walk? Have I eaten today? Like, those are skills that I didn't have before,
Yeah.
right? Whenever there was a worried thought, I would catastrophize, spiral right into it, just suck right into it. It felt so familiar and it felt so almost comforting.
Comforting.
So, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unlearn that through this kind of process and through this kind of practice. So that's what's in the book. And here's this is the advanced reader copy. So this isn't the final, but this is
Oh,
what story
gorgeous.
like. Thank you. But there's practices in there that I've learned and still to this day am continuing to learn to add to my toolbox of, like, how to do this, like, thing, this life thing, without, I want to experience everything fully. I don't want to make my life smaller to avoid pain and discomfort and tough times, because then you miss out on all of the joy.
Yes. Oh, you have created such containers for learning and for growth and for healing.
Mhm.
I feel so incredibly privileged to have had you come on today. Listeners, I broke down and cried like 2.5 times because it's so beautiful. And I think what I hope that people can get out of even just meeting you today or the day that they listen to this or watch this is that they get permission to be wherever they are on their healing journey, if they're reconciling parts of their past, It would be my wish for them that they get so much out of this that I feel I got even out of I I get excited about you. I'm like, I would love to interview Gigi. And then it's like, oh, wait a minute. Is it gonna be a little session for me to have a healing opportunity, it turns out? So thank you so, so much.
Hmm.
Well, everyone, please join me in thanking Gigi for coming today and sharing her insight and her wisdom and her courage and her power and her inspiration and her joy with us all. I am so privileged. We are so privileged to hear from you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really, really enjoyed this.
Thank you so much.